Hello ladies and gentlemen, Big Daddy Top Hat here. One project I've been working on throughout this year is the ultimate Double Dragon Retrospective, looking at every game published in said series. We are now deep into the history of the franchise and have looked at many different installments from over the years. But from where we left off last time, the brand was now in terrible shape, and the development house behind the original game, known as Technos Japan, had declared bankruptcy and were no more. Things could not have been much worse for the Double Dragon series, and following various mishaps, the future of the franchise was looking grim to say the least. This was until the release of a new game in the lineup known as Double Dragon Advance, released in 2003 for the Nintendo GBA. In today's video we are going to look at this game, how it came to be with Technos no longer in the picture, and if the Double Dragon franchise finally returned to good form. This, ladies and gentlemen, is the mad story of Double Dragon Advance, the return of the king. Yeah! Under the development leadership of Yoshihisa Kishimoto in the 1980s, the first two Double Dragon titles released in arcades were truly genre defining. The man's spiritual follow-ups to Renegade, or Neketsu Koha Kunio-kun as it was released in Japan, were revolutionary in their play mechanics, offering two-player cooperative side-scrolling beat-em-up fun for the first time. While after this point many Japanese game developers would take influence from Kishimoto's work and build on it, resulting in many high-quality games, Technos of Japan on the other hand began to manage their successful license in a number of questionable ways. Rather than putting Kishimoto in charge of the third arcade installment in the series, they outsourced the game to East Technology, resulting in a game that featured a huge dip in quality from what came before it, and an art direction that was not in tune with the others either. The Super Nintendo exclusive known as Super Double Dragon was a step up and featured some innovative play controls. One of the key directors who worked on the game was Muneki Ebenuma, a Double Dragon superfan who was given the opportunity to work on his favourite franchise. The game was decent but was unfinished, including leaving out both an intro and an ending. It could certainly have been better if it was not for Technos Japan's time constraints. Now past this point, Technos were willing to whore the Double Dragon license out to anyone who was willing to pay, which led to various results in terms of quality. First we had Battletoads Double Dragon, a decent Battletoads game featuring Bimmy and Jimmy in a deal put together by Trade West. There was then the awful cartoon released by Dick, a horrible fighting game based on the dreadful cartoon called Double Dragon 5, which was made by an American company called Leyland Interactive Media. Then to top it off there was the Double Dragon Hollywood movie, one of the worst video game movies of all time, and that is saying something. In Technos' dying days as a company, they would allow Muneki Ebenuma to head another project, a fighting game for the Neo Geo designed to cash in on the fighting game craze, a goal that Leyland Interactive Media had failed to achieve at an earlier date, when they put out Double Dragon 5. This new game would even feature full motion video footage from the previous terrible movie, but overall it's fun. While receiving lackluster reviews at the time, there is nothing wrong with this Neo Geo game, and it delivers a perfectly adequate fighting game experience. This game was not enough to save Technos Japan, as by 1996 they declared bankruptcy and ceased operations. Following the closure, a licensing company named Million Company Limited were formed to purchase the former intellectual properties of Technos, which would include IP such as Super Dodgeball, River City Ransom, and of course Double Dragon. What was so glorious about this purchase was that Million Company Limited were formed by former Technos employees, meaning they had a history with the licenses that they now owned. Under the ownership of Technos Japan, franchises like Double Dragon may have lost their brand identity due to allowing anyone to make Double Dragon products with little to no quality control, but Million Company Limited now have the golden opportunity to turn things around. Following an 8-year period with no new Double Dragon games whatsoever, news would break that a new entry in the series was on the way. Something that instantly made this project promising was that it was under the leadership of Muneki Ebenuma, a man who had previously been able to create two half-decent Double Dragon titles, even though at the time he was working for Technos Japan during their dark ages. Rather than trying to follow trends like he was instructed to do with the Neo Geo game, this time around he considered it wise to go back to the franchise's roots. As mentioned a million times on here before, to excuse the pun, the first two games were revolutionary, and that cannot be overstated enough. So surely it would make sense to celebrate what made Double Dragon such a huge deal in the first place. The goal with Double Dragon Advance quickly became to make a game that would preserve the brand's legacy, and to try and make people forget about all of the shortcomings that had happened post the two original titles. It was therefore quickly decided to make the game a side-scrolling beat-em-up of old, that not only largely mirrored the combat found in the all-time greats, but a game that also borrowed some of the best mechanics from the NES ports, and even Ebenuma's own Super Double Dragon as well. It was time to try and produce the best Double Dragon yet, that stayed true to itself. Double Dragon Advance, first released in 2003, would feature box art that played homage to the film Way of the Dragon. The cover depicts Billy and Jimmy in a fighting pose in the same way as the promotional shot of Bruce Lee and Chuck Norris, instantly illustrating the intended feel of the game. Million's game, that would be published by Atlus, would be a title that was hugely inspired by the original Double Dragon arcade game, and at first glance, new players would likely assume that the game is indeed an enhanced port of the 1987 original. But upon further inspection, the game delivers so much more than just that. Once again, martial artists Billy and Jimmy Lee must fight their way through hordes of enemies from the Shadow Warriors gang in an effort to rescue Billy's girlfriend Marion. As one would expect, the players' attacks from the original game are maintained, but as mentioned earlier, combat techniques are pulled over from other games too, such as the Hyper Uppercut and Hyper Knee from Double Dragon 2 The Revenge for the NES. In fact, Maneki has even gone one step further than that, and taken techniques from Kishimoto's other beat-em-ups too, such as Renegade and even Combat Tribes, a game many consider the real Double Dragon 3, as it was a cooperative beat-em-up released by Kishimoto whilst working at Technos that he worked on after The Revenge. The whole game is a love letter to Kishimoto's original works, so Combat Tribes, Sit on Punches and Jump Stomps make their way over to Double Dragon here. To add to the combat, new weapons get added to the mix too, such as Kali Sticks and Nunchucks for example. As you would want from Double Dragon, the game features two-player cooperative play, which is made possible via the GBA's link cable. However, if a player is playing alone, the game includes an innovative feature that allows one player to take control of both Lee brothers, via being able to switch between them in play. Kind of like in sports games when players can control a whole team. Upon starting a playthrough in this game, players are thrown into the opening stage from the arcade original. However, aside from the vastly improved combat mechanics, you would quickly notice every sprite in the game has been redrawn too. The whole game now plays from a more zoomed in perspective as well, so that gamers can experience this title more easily on a tiny Game Boy Advance screen. As you progress though, you will notice that these changes are just the tip of the iceberg, as where the original Double Dragon included just 4 simple stages, Double Dragon Advance on the other hand contains 8, which means that this game has all 4 original levels and 4 that were not present in the first game, making this experience both old and new simultaneously, which is exactly what Ebenuma set out to achieve from day one. Interestingly, even the game's new stages are inspired from previous entries in the series too, as we now have a Chinatown stage and a level that includes brawling atop a moving lorry. As you will probably be aware, ideas for both of these stages are plucked straight from Super Double Dragon, Ebenuma's first Double Dragon game. Further to this, the game now has a cavern stage, and in this case the stage was inspired by the first Double Dragon game to be released on the NES, a game that looked and played very differently to the Double Dragon title that surfaced in arcades. In terms of new stages, the game also has a new fortress stage that occurs just before the game's final level. All in all, by adding this new content to the title, Double Dragon Advance is now twice as long as the original Double Dragon game. Speaking of the original Double Dragon, the 1987 game is rather bothersome to go back and play today, due to the game suffering from ridiculous levels of slowdown. Double Dragon Advance, on the other hand, no longer suffers from these archaic problems, meaning that you can play all the original stages in the way that Kishimoto would have liked back in the day, if limitations were not blocking those possibilities. The game would also include a range of new enemies that were not included in 1987 either, such as the twin tigers Hon and Huang from Super Double Dragon, and the 5 emperors led by Raymond, a group of rival martial artists modelled after the final boss from the NES version of Double Dragon 2. On top of the changes to the stages themselves and the introductions of new ones altogether, the game also includes new cutscenes between every stage to help continue to progress the game's story, which, thinking about it, this must have been delightful for Ebinuma, considering this was one of the features that Super Double Dragon had missed out on previously simply due to time constraints. Throughout the game, combat is energetic and fast-paced, delivering an experience that is a huge step up from what came before it. Laced with a soundtrack full of music from the original Double Dragon game, the whole thing feels like something truly special that produces a level of beat-em-up bliss. New features do not end with what we have just covered either, as the game also now features a survival mode, a play mode that lets players hone their brawler skills by trying to KO as many successive enemies as possible within a dojo setting, which basically functions as an endless high score minigame. Overall, I guess the love and care put into this game is quite astonishing, particularly when you take into account the minimal amount of effort some development houses would apply when bringing their franchises over to the GBA. Check out most of the Sega Mega Drive's games that would be brought over, for example. Games like Comic Zone on the system are terrible. But Million, on the other hand, with Double Dragon Advance, made more effort to make Double Dragon something new. More than even Nintendo would bother to do with their Mario games, and this was back in the day when Nintendo actually used to still make some sort of effort with their ports. Another factoid that I guess is worth touching on with Double Dragon Advance is the regional differences between versions. The Japanese version of the game would arrive 4 months later than its Western counterparts. In this later version, a gallery is made available on the main menu after completing the game on the expert setting, and additionally the special thanks on the end credits now mention Bruce Lee, as well as the legendary Yoshihisa Kishimoto for both inspiring this handheld game. Also, further small tweaks were made too, such as the game's difficulty levels would be further rebalanced and a few minor bugs would be fixed as well. Reportedly, the Japanese instruction manuals would be of a higher quality too, featuring character profiles and combat lists. What either may or may not come as a surprise to you, the game received mostly praise, however it would still receive a fair amount of harsh criticism for being too short. Which makes little sense to me really, as it has more content than the majority of its contemporaries within the beat-em-up genre. GameSpot gave the game a decent 8.3 out of 10, writing, while the game may prove to be a bit too fleeting for anyone seeking a long-lasting gameplay experience, the game is still great fun, and is definitely worth playing through long after you've beaten it the first time. Game Informer gave the game an overall score of 9, writing, it's still no 30-hour marathon, but a whole lot has been added to an already excellent beat-em-up. IGN 2 would echo the same sentiment, stating it's great that the game retains an old school feel in an updated version on the Game Boy Advance, and as excellent fun as this brawler is on the GBA, it's over before it gets going. Overall, as you can see, critical response to Double Dragon Advance was pretty much universal. Journalists loved the game but would heavily complain that it was too short. And as a man who has played a hell of a lot of beat-em-ups, one can confirm that beat-em-ups are usually all around this sort of length, as you would not want the experience to become repetitive. Despite this, even with the most recent big beat-em-up releases such as Streets of Rage 4, it still received this copy and paste reception, with publications such as IGN heavily criticising this game's length too. This leaves me to ponder, why do journalists have it in their head that the longer a game is, the better it is? In fact, I cannot bring myself to play 99% of modern games, as I have not got the time or patience to pump many hours into a single title. I am not 10 years old after all, so need to spend most of my time either making money to support my family, or spending quality time with my wife and children. So I highly appreciate the lengths of beat-em-ups and do not bizarrely look at their short run times as some huge weakness, like most journalists seem to strangely do. It feels as if most writers for IGN etc. think everyone who plays video games have all the free time to waste in the world. Good gaming experiences can be short and concise, and Double Dragon Advance successfully delivers that in spades. In fact, it is the perfect game to pick up and play on a business trip, or waiting in a doctor's waiting room. It's a real man's game that you can dive into at any time. Double Dragon Advance delivers players exactly what Ebenuma intended to deliver, a great pick up and play game that heavily built and improved on the arcade originals. The title is fantastic and manages to produce the, in my opinion, quintessential Double Dragon experience. All of this leads me to question why most game journalists appear to have such a one-dimensional worldview, with this preconception that length is everything. But as someone who has now been playing on this earth for a while, I can tell you it's not about length, it's about girth. So stick your Double Dragon in your slot and have fun. Yeah! So, ladies and gentlemen, that was the mad story of Double Dragon Advance, arguably the greatest brawler of the early 2000s. The king of beat-em-ups had returned to its throne, meaning there would of course be even more Double Dragon games to come down the line. If you are new here, make sure you hit that subscribe button, and why not check out my playlist featuring 7 more Double Dragon videos. Or if you want to learn more about the beat 'em up genre in general, check out my beat 'em up list instead, as I have now covered more than 40 games from this particular niche. If you are really hardcore and you want extra brand new content, I give away one exclusive video weekly to everyone who backs the future of the channel for $5 a month over on Patreon. In my Patreon only library there are now 2 biopic videos covering the life and times of Blaze Fielding and Tyrus Flair, so why not check them out. Speaking of patrons, the very people who allow me to do what I do, huge girthy thank yous go out to Sebastian Velez, Carl Johnson, The Murder of Crows, Heo Paulo Lopez, Joseph Rasmek, Luke Samuel Denton, Ben Harradine, Corey Imars Sr., Capcom vs SNK, BXL Gotham, Rowan Dinched, Evan Balder, Philip Nant, Cambo Rambo 82, Azra Arkai, Keith Ferguson, Joaquin Varela, Prince Knight, Michael Cullix, Ego, Jordan Durant, Angel Light 85, Alethea Swanson, Timothy W. Haskins II, Nick Daniels, Princess Zana, Glennie Glenn, Daniel Daly, Computer Man, House of the Ted, Gary Pinkett, ECU Professor, Kid Anime, Justin Wang, Aaron McNamara, Hermes Gonzalez, Instant Gratification Monkey, Man Shovel, James Bishop, JB, Posty XL, Michael Hall, Wesley Sang-hee, Ben Dover, Langston Miller, Noob, Brian Barry, Sarah Powell, Vlaming Renee, Marvin Araliga, Chris Cool, TOG Driver, Adrian Hannington, Bernard NG, Richard Stu Stewart, James McDonald, Dan Van Dammit, Adam Castin, Luis Viant, John Bates, David Bowell, Chris Fisk, Paul Elliott, Mike Bruno, Rick67, Antonio Rodriguez, Craig Jenkins, Tom Elliott, Retroverse.com, Casey Wright, Synth Spaces, Zai, Andrew Bazansky, Gunther Hendricks, and everybody else who backs the channel. I love you long time. Yeah. Cheerio.